5 words. That's all it took. 5 words for Julian Hartwick to slide his hand onto Jasmine's lower back, lean in close enough that she could smell the whiskey on his breath, and murmur, "A woman like you shouldn't be here alone." And the entire charity gala went silent. No orchestra, no polite laughter over canapes, no champagne glasses clinking. Even the string quartet in the corner seemed to stop mid-note. Jasmine went rigid. She could feel the presumptuous weight of his palm through the silk of her burgundy gown, the entitled smirk playing at the corner of his mouth. But what really made her pulse spike was the shift in the room, the sudden vacuum of sound, the way every head in the ballroom had turned toward the entrance. Strange thing was, no one was looking at Julian and her. That realization sent ice down her spine. Julian didn't notice. No awareness, no survival instinct, nothing. Just kept that predatory grin fixed on her face like he'd already won whatever game he thought he was playing, completely oblivious to the 2 security guards who had gone pale near the coat check, to the mayor's wife whose champagne flute had stopped halfway to her lips. Jasmine's stomach dropped. You know that feeling when you realize the ground beneath you has already opened up? That the world has tilted and there's no going back? That's what hit her in that crystalline moment. Then came the footsteps, slow, deliberate, dress shoes on marble that somehow cut through the silence like a countdown. Julian finally looked up, and the smirk died on his face. Perfect. The trap Julian had walked into with his cheap cologne and cheaper lines was about to spring shut. Except he didn't set this trap, because here's what Julian Hartwick didn't know. The woman he was touching, she wasn't just another beautiful face at a networking event, and the man crossing the ballroom toward them with murder in his eyes and 20 of Seoul's most dangerous operatives on speed dial, that was her husband. And before I tell you exactly how Sung-Ho Park turned this glittering charity gala into the most terrifying night of Julian's life, and how Jasmine's carefully built world of corporate anonymity shattered in a single possessive gesture, hit that subscribe button and tell me in the comment section where you are watching from. You need to understand something. This moment changed everything. The Mercedes S-Class pulled away from the gala with barely a whisper. But inside, the silence was deafening. Jasmine sat perfectly still in the passenger seat, hands folded in her lap, watching the city lights blur past her window. She could feel Yoon Sung-ho beside her, close enough that the scent of his cologne mixed with something darker, more dangerous, adrenaline maybe, or rage that hadn't fully settled. His hands gripped the steering wheel with the kind of control that came from holding back, knuckles white against black leather. That same hand that had wrapped around Julian's throat and lifted him 6 inches off the ground without breaking a sweat. She should probably say something. "Thank you? I had it under control? Why did you do that?" But the words wouldn't come. Because deep down, past the shock and the racing heartbeat and the feeling that her entire carefully constructed life had just imploded in front of 300 witnesses, there was something else. Relief. Her phone buzzed. Then again, and again. Jasmine pulled it from her clutch and the screen lit up like a Christmas tree. 43 missed calls, 67 texts, most from her office. Her stomach twisted as she scrolled through the preview messages. "Jasmine, what the hell happened at the Preston Gala? Is it true you're married to that Yoon Sung-ho? Call me ASAP. The partners are asking questions. Girl, you need to see what they're posting on Twitter." She closed her eyes. Of course someone had filmed it. Someone always filmed everything. By now, the video of Sung-Ho crossing that ballroom, the way every person in his path had scattered like he was carrying a plague, the moment his hand had closed around Julian's neck, the deadly quiet of his voice when he'd said, "She's my wife," all of it was probably already viral. "Don't," Sung-Ho said quietly. First word he'd spoken since they'd left. Jasmine looked at him. His profile was carved from stone, jaw set, eyes fixed on the road ahead, but that single word carried the weight of everything unsaid between them. Don't read the messages. Don't spiral. Don't regret this. She should be angry. She should be furious that he'd broken his promise, that he'd exposed everything they'd worked so hard to keep separate. Her world and his world, corporate strategist and crime boss, light and shadow. Except they weren't heading toward their shared apartment in Gangnam, the neutral ground where Jasmine Kim and Yoon Sung-ho could pretend to be a normal couple. The car turned east, toward Pyeongchangdong, toward the compound. Jasmine's breath caught as the implications crystallized. The fortress gates were opening, and she was about to understand exactly what it meant to be claimed by the most dangerous man in Seoul. The gates were 12 feet tall, solid steel disguised as ornamental iron, the kind that whispered old money to anyone who didn't know better. But Jasmine knew better. She'd been here exactly 3 times in 18 months of marriage. Twice for brief visits that felt more like diplomatic missions. Once for their private wedding ceremony in the garden pavilion, surrounded by men in suits who'd bowed to her like she was royalty and terrified her in equal measure. The gates swung open without Sung-ho even slowing down. Cameras tracked their approach. Jasmine counted at least 6 security personnel in the shadows, though she knew there were more. There were always more. The main house rose from the hillside like something out of a different era. Traditional Korean architecture merged seamlessly with modern fortification, beautiful and impenetrable, exactly like the man beside her. Sung-ho pulled into the circular drive and killed the engine. The silence rushed back, heavier now, more final. "Sung-ho," Jasmine started. "Inside first." His voice was soft, but it wasn't a request. 2 men appeared at the car doors before Jasmine could even reach for the handle. She recognized them, Min-jun and Tae-young, Sung-ho's most trusted lieutenants. They'd been at the wedding. Min-jun had smiled at her then, called her Hyung-soo-nim with genuine warmth. Tonight, their faces were carved from granite. Min-jun opened her door and offered his hand. "Mrs. Yoon." Not Jasmine, not even she. Mrs. Yoon. The shift wasn't subtle. It was seismic. Jasmine took his hand and stepped out, her heels clicking against the stone driveway. The night air was cooler here, away from the city center, cleaner. She could hear water from the koi pond, the rustle of bamboo in the garden. She could also hear the low murmur of voices from inside the house, a lot of voices. "How many?" Sung-ho asked Min-jun quietly as he rounded the car. 18, the inner circle. They assembled an hour ago when the video started circulating. Jasmine's stomach dropped. An hour ago, while she'd been trapped in that silent car ride, Sung-ho's entire organization had been mobilizing, reacting to the fact that their boss had just publicly claimed a wife most of them barely knew existed. Sung-ho's hand found the small of her back, possessive, protective, exactly where Julian's had been 2 hours and a lifetime ago. But this touch sent electricity down her spine for entirely different reasons. "They're here for you," he said, leaning close enough that only she could hear. "Not to question, to protect." "I don't need—" "Yes." His eyes locked on hers, and for the first time since the gala, she saw past the ice-cold control to the man underneath. "You do, and you're about to understand why." The front doors opened, warm light spilled out onto the stone steps, and Jasmine realized with crystalline clarity that she wasn't walking into a house, she was walking into a fortress that had just locked its gates around her. The question was whether she was being protected or imprisoned. The study smelled like leather and old wood, and something darker Jasmine couldn't quite name. Danger, maybe, or secrets that had soaked into the walls over decades. Sung-ho closed the door behind them, and suddenly the murmur of 18 men in the house below disappeared. Soundproofing, of course. He moved to the desk, a massive thing that looked like it had survived wars, and pulled out a drawer. Not the top one where normal people kept pens and paper clips, a hidden compartment that released with a soft click only when his thumb pressed a specific spot on the carved panel. Jasmine's heels sank into the plush carpet as she watched him extract a leather portfolio. Her heart was doing that thing again where it couldn't decide between racing and stopping completely. "Sit," Sung-ho said, gesturing to the chair across from his desk. "I'd rather stand." His eyes met hers. Something flickered there. Approval, maybe, or respect for the fact that she wasn't going to fold just because the fortress gates had closed behind her. "Then stand." He opened the portfolio and spread the contents across the desk. "But look." Jasmine stepped forward, and her breath caught. Photographs. Dozens of them. Her leaving her office building. Her at the coffee shop 2 blocks from work where she grabbed her morning latte. Her entering their Gangnam apartment. Her at the gym, the grocery store, the dry cleaners. Surveillance photos. But it was the red X's that made her blood run cold. Marked over parking garages. Marked over the alley behind her favorite lunch spot. Marked over the route she jogged every Saturday morning. 6 months. Sung-ho said quietly, his finger tracing the timeline written in precise Korean script along the margin. 6 months of intercepted contracts, 3 different organizations, 2 from the Triad in Busan, and, he pulled out another sheet, 1 independent contractor we're still trying to identify. Jasmine's hands gripped the edge of the desk. The wood was cool and solid and real, which was good because nothing else felt real right now. "The Preston Gala," he continued, pulling out a final document. "We had intelligence that someone would make a move tonight. That's why I was there." His jaw tightened. "What I didn't anticipate was Julian fucking Hartwick putting his hands on you in a room full of cameras." "You broke your promise," Jasmine whispered. "You said you'd stay in the shadows, that I could keep my life separate." "Your life?" Sung-ho's voice was still soft, but there was steel underneath. He spread his hands over the photographs, over 6 months of documented threats, of men watching her, following her, planning. "Jasmine, you haven't had a separate life since the day you said yes to me in Seoul." The weight of it hit her then, not just the danger, the truth. She'd never been hidden, she'd only ever been protected, and tonight, protection required revelation. "Do you remember what you said to me?" Jasmine's voice cracked, and she hated herself for it. "In the pavilion, when you put that ring on my finger?" Sung-ho's expression shifted. The ice cracked, just slightly. "Every word." "Then say it." He was quiet for a long moment, his dark eyes searching her face. Then he moved around the desk, closing the distance between them until she could feel the heat radiating from him, could see the small scar above his left eyebrow that he'd never explained. "I promised," he said slowly, "that you would never have to choose between your world and mine, that I would stay in the shadows so you could walk in the light." Jasmine closed her eyes. The memory came rushing back. The garden pavilion had been strung with paper lanterns, their soft glow reflecting off the koi pond. It was just past sunset, that magical hour when Seoul held its breath between day and night. 18 men in dark suits ringed the perimeter, witnesses and guards in equal measure. Sung-ho had worn a traditional hanbok, and she'd never seen him look more dangerous or more beautiful. When he'd taken her hands, his had been steady, while hers trembled. "I know what I'm asking of you," he'd said in Korean, then switched to English for her sake. "To marry a man whose name makes people cross the street. To bind yourself to something you never asked for." "Then why are you asking?" She'd needed to hear it. "Because I'm selfish." His thumb had brushed across her knuckles. "Because 6 months of watching you walk into that corporate tower every morning, of sharing coffee and conversation like we are normal people, has ruined me for anyone else." Sung-ho, "He will stay in the shadows," he'd promised, and his voice carried the weight of an oath. "You will keep your firm, your colleagues, your career. Your name stays Kim. Your life stays yours. I swear it." The ring had slid onto her finger. Simple platinum, no diamonds to catch the light and draw questions. Invisible, like the marriage itself. Like him. Until tonight. Jasmine opened her eyes and found Sung-ho watching her with an intensity that made her chest ache. You kept that promise for 18 months, even when it cost you, even when your own people questioned why their boss's wife was a ghost. Yes. So why break it now? His hand came up slowly, carefully, giving her time to pull away. When she didn't, his palm cupped her cheek, thumb brushing away a tear she hadn't realized had fallen. Because, Sung-ho said, and his voice was raw in a way she'd never heard before, I would burn down every shadow I've ever hidden in before I let someone hurt you. The truth settled between them like a third presence in the room. Some promises were meant to break, some vows were stronger than the ones spoken at altars, and some men loved dangerously. Jasmine lasted exactly 4 hours at her desk before she realized nothing would ever be the same. She'd arrived at Sterling and Locke at 7 a.m. sharp, same as always. Power suit, laptop bag, the confident stride of a woman who'd closed 3 major acquisitions in the last quarter. She'd nodded to security, Marcus had nodded back, but his smile didn't quite reach his eyes, and taken the elevator to the 14th floor. That's when the whispers started. The associates clustered by the coffee station went silent when she passed. Jennifer from M&A suddenly remembered she had an urgent call. David, who'd eaten lunch with her every Thursday for 2 years, found something fascinating on his phone screen. By 8 a.m., her calendar had been mysteriously cleared. 3 client meetings, gone. The strategy session with the partners, postponed indefinitely. By 9 a.m., her office felt like a quarantine zone. Jasmine stared at her computer screen, at the email that had arrived at 8:47 from Richard Sterling himself. Jasmine, we need to discuss recent developments. My office, 11 a.m. Come alone. Come alone, like she might bring armed guards. The thought would have been funny if her hands weren't shaking. A knock at her door made her jump. Come in. It was Sophie, her paralegal. Sweet Sophie who brought everyone cookies and remembered birthdays. Except Sophie wasn't quite meeting her eyes as she set a stack of files on the desk. The Hutchinson merger documents. You asked for them yesterday. Thanks, Sophie. The young woman turned to leave, then hesitated. Jasmine, She glanced over her shoulder like someone might be listening. I just wanted you to know that I don't care who you're married to. You've always been good to me. The past tense hit like a slap. Sophie, but maybe, Sophie's voice dropped to a whisper, maybe you should be careful. There are people here who are scared, and scared people do stupid things. Then she was gone, closing the door with a soft click that sounded like a coffin lid. Jasmine's phone buzzed, a text from an unknown number. They're pulling you from the Kyung Industries deal. Partners decided you're a conflict of interest. Thought you should know before the meeting. Marcus L. Marcus Lee, junior partner, one of the few Korean attorneys at the firm who'd actually been friendly when she'd started 3 years ago. Kyung Industries, her deal, the one she'd spent 8 months cultivating, negotiating, perfecting, the deal that would have made her a senior associate. Jasmine looked around her office, at the diplomas on the wall, the awards, the framed photo from the charity 5K the firm had sponsored. 3 years of building a reputation, of being brilliant, dependable Jasmine Kim who outworked everyone and never caused problems. All of it crumbling because of 5 words Sung-ho had spoken in a ballroom. She's my wife. The question wasn't whether she could go back to being just Jasmine. The question was whether that woman had ever really existed at all. The conference room at the Pyeongchang-dong compound was nothing like the sterile glass boxes at Sterling and Locke. Dark wood paneling, a table that could seat 30, and an atmosphere so thick with testosterone and danger that Jasmine could practically taste it. 18 pairs of eyes tracked her entrance. Sung-hoo sat at the head of the table, Min-jun to his right. The rest of the inner circle fanned out in what was clearly a hierarchy Jasmine didn't fully understand yet. She recognized a few faces from the wedding. Most were strangers. All of them looked like they could kill her without breaking a sweat. "Gentlemen," Sung-hoo said in Korean, his voice carrying the kind of quiet authority that made men twice his age sit straighter. "My wife will be joining us today." No explanation, no apology, just fact. A chair scraped back, the one to Sung-hoo's left, Min-jun's doing. The symbolic weight of that empty seat wasn't lost on anyone in the room. Jasmine crossed to it, heels clicking against hardwood, and sat. She kept her spine straight, her expression neutral. Corporate poker face. Turned out it worked just as well with gangsters as it did with hedge fund managers. "We have a problem," Min-jun said, pulling up a map on the display screen. "The shipment from Busan is being held at customs. Our usual contacts are suddenly unavailable, and the port authority is asking questions they shouldn't know to ask." Someone talked. A man Jasmine didn't recognize growled. Tattoos crept up his neck, disappearing under his collar. "Or someone's being paid to delay us," another added. The discussion devolved into rapid-fire Korean, voices rising, accusations flew. Someone suggested violence, creative, specific violence that made Jasmine's stomach turn. She watched the map on the screen. Busan Port, Zone 3, a shipment of automotive parts that was clearly nothing of the sort. The pieces clicked into place with the same satisfying precision as a good merger structure. "It's not a leak," Jasmine said quietly. The room went silent. 18 pairs of eyes swiveled to her. Sung-hoo leaned back in his chair, the ghost of a smile playing at his lips. "Explain." Jasmine stood and moved to the screen, her mind already running calculations. "Zone 3 has been under federal audit for the last month. I saw it in the maritime shipping report. Boring reading, but relevant for the Kyung deal I was working, had been working. They're scrutinizing everything, which means your usual bribes won't work, because the people you're bribing are being watched." "So we're stuck?" Tattoo Neck said. "No." Jasmine pulled up her phone, fingers flying across the screen. "We reroute through Zone 7, different jurisdiction, different inspectors. But," she looked at Min-jun, "you'll need to reclassify the shipment, change the manifest to electronics, pay the higher tariff, take the loss." "That's a 3 million won loss," someone protested. "It's a 30 million won loss if the shipment gets seized, plus whatever you lose when your Busan contacts get investigated." The room was silent for a beat. Then Sung-hoo spoke. "Do it." Min-jun nodded, already typing on his phone. And Jasmine felt it, the subtle shift in the room, the way spines relaxed slightly, the way eyes that had been hostile now held something else. Respect. She'd just walked into the lion's den and proven she had teeth of her own. The package arrived at 4 p.m., delivered to the front gate by a motorcycle courier who disappeared into traffic before security could get a plate number. Jasmine was in the library, halfway through a file on the organization's legitimate business holdings, because apparently her husband owned 17 restaurants, a construction company, and 3 nightclubs, when Min-jun appeared in the doorway. His face told her everything she needed to know. "What is it?" she asked, already standing. "You should come with me." They found Sung-ho in the security office, surrounded by monitors and 2 grim-faced men in tactical gear. On the center screen, frozen in high definition, was a photograph of Jasmine, leaving Sterling and Locke that morning. The timestamp read 11:47 a.m., right after her disastrous meeting with Richard Sterling, where she'd been politely but firmly placed on indefinite administrative leave pending a review of potential conflicts of interest. Someone had been watching, following, waiting. "There's more," Sung-ho said, his voice deadly calm in the way that meant he was absolutely furious. Minjun handed her a card. Heavy stock, expensive, the kind of thing that came with wedding invitations or funeral announcements. The message was printed in English, clearly meant for her. Mrs. Yoon, welcome to your new life. We look forward to getting better acquainted. The Red Lotus. Jasmine's hand didn't shake. She wouldn't let it. Red Lotus. That's the Shanghai Triad's new faction in Seoul, Sung-ho finished. They've been testing boundaries for 6 months, small provocations, territory disputes. His eyes met hers. This isn't small. They know where I work, where I'll be vulnerable. The implications crashed over her like cold water. The meeting this morning, all those witnesses, they know I'm isolated now. Which is exactly what they want. Minjun pulled up another screen. More surveillance photos. Jasmine at the coffee shop, at the gym, entering their Gangnam apartment, the one she'd never go back to, she realized with sudden clarity. The security details she'd hated suddenly made perfect sense. How many? Jasmine asked. Sung-ho looked at her. How many what? How many men are you assigning to me? 4, rotating shifts. Minjun will coordinate. I want 6. Jasmine cut him off, surprising herself as much as the men in the room. Mrs. Yoon, Minjun said, his eyebrows raising. They sent this message because they think I'm weak, a liability, proof that you chose emotion over strategy. Jasmine set the card down on the console with deliberate precision. So we send a message back that I'm not hiding, that protecting me requires resources they'll have to go through. Sung-ho studied her for a long moment, then something shifted in his expression. Pride, maybe, or recognition. 6 men, he agreed, visible. And I want to know everything about the Red Lotus. Jasmine turned to face both men fully. Their operations, their leadership, their weaknesses. If they're going to make me a target, I want to understand exactly who I'm dealing with. Minjun glanced at Sung-ho, who nodded once. The lion's den had just gained a new predator, and she was learning to hunt. The plan came together over 3 days, in the study that still smelled like leather and secrets, with maps spread across Sung-ho's desk and coffee going cold in cups they forgot to drink. Jasmine had spent 72 hours learning things she'd never wanted to know. How the Red Lotus laundered money through shipping containers, how they'd been slowly encroaching on Sung-ho's territory in Itaewon, testing his response time, measuring his willingness to escalate, how they'd already killed 2 of his lower-level operators in what they'd made look like accidents, and how they'd been planning to use her, the secret wife, the corporate lawyer who thought she could straddle 2 worlds, as the ultimate pressure point. Here, Jasmine said, circling a location on the financial records Minjun had compiled. Their front company, Phoenix Imports. They're using it to move product through Incheon, but look at the corporate structure. Sung-ho leaned over her shoulder, close enough that she could feel his breath on her neck. What am I looking at? A shell company with Delaware registration funneling through a Singapore holding corporation, which means, she pulled up another document, they're subject to international banking regulations. One call to the right regulatory agency and their accounts freeze for a minimum of 90 days during investigation. That cuts off their cash flow, Minjun said, understanding dawning. But it doesn't stop their operations. No, Jasmine turned to Sung-ho. That's where you come in. The room went quiet. Outside, she could hear the distant sound of men training in the compound's lower levels. Inside, 3 people plotted something that existed in the razor-thin space between legal strategy and organized crime. They're expecting muscle, a direct confrontation, territory war. That's how this world works, right? She looked between the 2 men. But what if we hit them where they're not protected? I freeze their money legally, audits, investigations, regulatory holds, while they're scrambling to explain their finances to authorities who are suddenly very interested. We move on their physical operations, Sung-ho finished, a dangerous smile playing at his lips. The warehouses in Incheon, the distribution network in Gangnam. Without cash flow to pay their soldiers, their loyalty becomes negotiable. "And the ones who sent you that card?" asked Min-jun quietly. Sung-ho's expression went cold. "That's personal, and it gets handled personally." Jasmine should have been horrified, should have pushed back against the violence she could hear lurking under those words. But when she closed her eyes, she saw that photograph of herself leaving her office, saw the threat wrapped in expensive cardstock, saw 18 months of her life crumbling because men like the Red Lotus thought they could use her to hurt the man she'd married. "When?" Jasmine asked. "Tomorrow night," Sung-ho said. "I'll coordinate with our contacts at the Port Authority. You," he turned to Jasmine, "make your calls to the regulatory agencies in the morning. By the time they realize what's happening, we'll already be moving." "And if something goes wrong?" Sung-ho's hand found hers on the desk. "Then we adapt. Together. Together. Not him protecting her from the shadows, not her pretending his world didn't exist. Together, merging strategy and force into something neither of them could have accomplished alone." The counterstrike was set, and the Red Lotus was about to learn that they'd made a fatal miscalculation. They'd threatened a corporate strategist who could dismantle empires with paperwork, who also happened to be married to a man who could dismantle them with everything else. The charity auction at the Sheila Hotel was exactly the kind of event Jasmine would have attended 3 weeks ago, before, when she was still pretending to be just another corporate attorney who happened to close good deals and look good in evening wear. That woman was gone. The woman who stepped out of the Mercedes S-Class, flanked by 6 men in dark suits who made no attempt to blend in, was someone else entirely. Jasmine wore red again. Not burgundy this time, but crimson silk that clung to her curves and commanded attention. Her hair was swept up, diamonds at her throat, real ones now because hiding was over. And on her arm, wearing a tuxedo like it was armor, was Yoon Sung-ho. Together, they made every head turn. Not like before at the Preston Gala, where people had scattered in fear. This time, the crowd parted with something closer to reverence, or maybe calculation, the kind of respect that came from understanding exactly how much power was walking through their midst. "Mrs. Yoon," the event coordinator stammered, appearing with a tablet and a nervous smile, "we've seated you at table 1, with the ambassador and—" "Perfect," Jasmine said smoothly, as if she'd been doing this her entire life. She caught sight of familiar faces as they moved through the ballroom. Marcus Lee from Sterling and Locke, who gave her a subtle nod of acknowledgement. Jennifer from M&A, who suddenly found her champagne fascinating. And there, near the silent auction tables, Richard Sterling himself, looking like he'd swallowed something unpleasant. The Kyung Industries deal closed 2 days ago, without her. The acquiring company's stock dropped 8% on opening because whoever took over her work had missed a crucial liability clause. Jasmine's work would have caught it, but that wasn't her problem anymore. "You're enjoying this," Sung-ho murmured as they reached their table. "Is it that obvious?" His hand settled on her lower back, possessive, protective, exactly where it belonged. "Only to me." The evening unfolded like a carefully choreographed dance. Dinner conversation where Jasmine held her own with diplomats and CEOs, discussing everything from trade policy to the art market. A live auction where Sung-ho bid on and won a sculpture that would look perfect in their home, singular. The Gangnam apartment was already packed up. And through it all, Jasmine felt the weight of eyes on her, calculating, reassessing, understanding that the rules had changed. She wasn't the corporate lawyer who'd married into danger. She was the woman who'd learned to weaponize both worlds. When Chen Wei approached their table during dessert, Jasmine recognized him instantly from the files. Red Lotus, mid-level operator trying to look legitimate in a rental tux. "Mr. Yoon," he said with a tight smile, "I wanted to congratulate you on—" My wife and I are enjoying our evening. I'd hate for anything to interrupt it." Chen's smile faltered. His eyes darted to Jasmine, then to the 6 men positioned strategically around the room, then back to Sung-ho. "Of course. My apologies." He retreated. Fast. Jasmine took a sip of champagne, hiding her smile. "The Phoenix Imports accounts are still frozen, by the way. The investigation has been extended another 60 days. And their warehouse in Incheon is under new management as of this morning," Sung-ho replied casually, as if discussing the weather. Around them, the ballroom glittered. Crystal chandeliers, designer gowns, the veneer of civility that Seoul's elite wore like armor. But everyone here knew the truth now. The most dangerous couple in the room wasn't hiding anymore. They were standing in the light, together, daring anyone to challenge them. And no one would. Not after the Red Lotus, not after everyone had seen what happened when you threatened what belonged to Yoon Sung-ho, or underestimated what his wife could do. Jasmine leaned into her husband's shoulder, felt his arm come around her waist, and smiled. This was her life now. Corporate strategy and crime lord politics, boardrooms and fortresses, light and shadow merged into something new, something powerful, something entirely hers. The gala continued around them, but Jasmine Yoon had already won.
Sometimes the most dangerous thing you can do is stop hiding and let the world see exactly who you are. Jasmine didn't set out to become a mafia wife. She was just trying to build a career, closing deals, climbing the corporate ladder, keeping her professional life pristine no matter what. But Sung-ho, he had other plans. He saw past her compartmentalization, past her careful boundaries, past the brilliant strategist everyone else took at face value. He saw someone worth claiming, even if it meant shattering the shadows he'd promised to stay in. And that changed everything. Was it reckless? Absolutely. Should a corporate lawyer have married into organized crime? Maybe not. But here's what I keep thinking about. What if the lines we draw between legitimate and criminal, light and shadow, are just illusions we tell ourselves to feel safe? Sung-ho had everything: power, fear, an empire built on calculated violence, but he would have burned it all down the moment someone put their hands on his wife. Jasmine didn't ask his permission to walk into his world, didn't wait for him to keep his promise about staying hidden. She just saw the man who'd been protecting her for 18 months without recognition and refused to let that go unacknowledged. And sometimes that's all it takes. One moment of crisis, one person who refuses to stay safely separate and insists on standing beside you instead. So here's my question. Can you really live in 2 worlds, or do you eventually have to choose? And when you choose, do you lose yourself, or do you finally become who you were always meant to be? Drop your thoughts below. Was Jasmine's transformation courage or surrender? Did Sung-ho's promise deserve to be broken? And would you have been brave enough to merge corporate strategy with criminal empire, knowing there's no going back? If this story reminded you that power comes in many forms and the most dangerous partnerships are built on radical honesty, hit subscribe. I'm here every week with stories about impossible choices, unlikely alliances, and the fierce love that refuses to hide in shadows. Because the best stories aren't about heroes and villains, they're about people who stop pretending and start owning exactly who they are. Until next time, stay dangerous. Silent Speaks Story, where every story leaves a mark.